in our Zen vocabulary, our Buddhist vocabulary, there's one recurring phrase, which is to realize the Buddha way, or to fulfill the Buddha way. And that's the thing I want to touch on today in this little offering talk. With the disclaimer, as always, that anything I say is subject to correction from Jindo. I'm just a novice learning, so take that, please, with a grain of salt. The idea of fulfilling or realizing the Buddha way is so very present in our day-to-day Buddhist activities. We repeat that sentence at the end of the sutra closing verse. We do that every month during the monthly Zazenkai, and at the end we say, "May we and all living beings together realize the Buddha way." It's an aspiration that we express after we receive the Dharma formally. We also repeat that during our Bodhisattva vows. The last one is to attain the enlightened way, or the Buddha way. So it is part of our vernacular, it's part of our path as practitioners in Buddhism. And for the past weeks, I've been reading the Lotus Sutra, which is extremely important in our tradition. Master Dogen's entire style of writing has been, or was, shaped by his love for the Lotus Sutra. And in the second chapter of the Lotus Sutra, called Expedient Means, the Buddha explains how all the Buddhas before him, including himself, figured out people's actual needs and gave teachings that were suitable for those practitioners. The Buddha calls them people of lesser understanding, which, nowadays we look at it a little bit like, But it points to people that have different abilities, different inclinations, and different capacities at different moment, and meeting them where they are. And the Buddha says that he and all the Buddhas before him used expedient means, which were basically provisional or partial teachings given to help someone get on the right path. Right? The sutra calls it enabling them to enter the Buddha way. And the Buddha taught, teachings, provisional teachings like that of nirvana, cessation of suffering, taught people to aspire to that. There was the way of the arhat, the way of the shravaka, the way of the pratyeka Buddha. These are all fancy terms for people that practice in different ways with specific goals, which is something that nowadays we don't really talk about like that. Within our Zen practice, we don't talk about practicing with goals. But it was part of the Buddha's teachings, and he clearly said it was meant to enable these practitioners to enter the Buddha way. And so then I ask myself, reading that, well, what does it mean to be on the Buddha way? Because if you enter it, it means then you're on it. So what does that look like? Well, in my understanding, in my view, to express it, I would say life right here, right now, with all of its circumstances, all of its difficulties, challenges, limitations, joys, sorrows, everything that we consider to be our life is the way. And the method or the way in which we live our life is the fulfillment. The way we apply the teachings of the Buddha, the way we engage with what arises in our day-to-day lives. Whether we can draw from the Dharma or not is the essential point. In the Lotus Sutra, in the second chapter, the Buddha takes time to describe all kinds of practitioners and their specific circumstances. But there was one paragraph in particular that really jumped at me when I read it, and I actually highlighted all of it and thought, this is a very useful piece of information, worthy remembering. And so the way the Buddha describes the people that fulfill the Buddha way eventually is using the following terms. He says, if any living beings, having encountered Buddhas in the past and having heard the Dharma, have been generous, moral, patient, and persistent, practiced meditation and wisdom, and so on, in various ways cultivating merit and virtue, all such people have fulfilled the Buddha way. Let's look at it again. If someone, having heard the Dharma, the Buddha says, was during his lifetime generous, moral, patient, persistent, practiced zazen, practiced wisdom, in various ways cultivated merit and virtue, they have effectively fulfilled the Buddha way. What I take from that is realizing the Buddha way, fulfilling the Buddha way, is a continuous activity. It is not a specific point in our practice, a specific stage that we get to, and then I have fulfilled the Buddha way. There's nothing left to fulfill. There's nothing left to realize. No, the Buddha says, if someone has been generous, moral, patient, all those qualities, when? I assume at the end of their journey in this life and in this body. That means to me that the Buddha way has the width, the span of our own lives. It is as immeasurable as the scenery of our life. Notice that in the paragraph, the Buddha doesn't say just sit in meditation. If you sit in meditation for 15, 20 hours a day, you don't need to do anything else. No, the Buddha says generosity matters, morality matters, patience matters, persistence, forbearance, zazen matters, but also wisdom. Cultivating merit, we generally use the term sincere efforts, right? What we do with a generous heart in our practice is our sincere efforts, is the merit. And virtue. All of these things come into play in order to be able to say that someone has realized the Buddha way. Not just sitting zazen. In sitting zazen, we completely realize the Buddha way in that span of time. Junda always says it. There's nothing to attain. There's nothing to add, nothing to take away when we sit zazen, with that conviction in our bones that this is the here, the now. It's the whole span of the Buddha way as we're sitting. But then we get up. We sit for 30 minutes in the morning or the evening, or maybe we sit for another 30 minutes during the day. And then we get up. And we walk head on into the brutal environment of our day-to-day lives. Some of us are fortunate and we live in calm, peaceful places where we have a roof over our head and we have food on the table and we have heating in the house and warm water and money in our bank accounts and conditions are good. Life is good. But there are friends of ours, brothers and sisters in the practice, that suffer tremendously in other places of the world because of oppression, because of discrimination, because of conflict, because of poverty, because of so many difficult conditions. So the Buddha way is all of that. Not just us sitting here. And so when we get up and we walk into the craziness of the life, we are still on the Buddha way. Which is why we make vows. We talk about vows a lot. And we repeat them every Zazenkai and probably every day, many of us. We make that final vow, which is to attain the enlightened way, a way non-attainable. And to give a separate translation that fits a little better with our topic here, it would be, the Buddha way is unsurpassable and I vow to realize it. The way to realize it is within the scenery of our day-to-day lives. There is no enlightenment apart from everyday life. There is nowhere else to look for it. It is this moment and how I engage with it. And then this moment and this moment. And that's how we handle, how we approach, how we practice in those moments is the fulfilling or the fulfillment of the Buddha way. So basically our task is to strive to stay, to remain on the Buddha way. And we do that not as a selfish goal, but we do that for the sake of the Buddha way. That's the tricky aspect of this. The Buddha says, if someone heard the Dharma and then lived their lives with generosity, morality, patience, persistence, sitting zazen, practicing wisdom, cultivating merit and virtue, if they did that throughout their lives, they fulfilled the Buddha way. However, if one sets out to attain the Buddha way, one realizes it is, as the vow says, unattainable, unsurpassable. There is no point at which we can say, now we stop. It's all accomplished. I mentioned earlier the Buddha taught different practices and even taught his disciples about different stages within the practice. Some of that is still taught in other traditions of Buddhism, including Zen. But in the Lotus Sutra, he talks about the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas and the Arhats, and he praises their achievements and attainments. But then, under the same breath, he says, in a future life, they will realize the Buddha way. In a future existence, in the coming existence, they will realize. At some point, if they keep focusing on practicing, the way I taught them, they will realize the Buddha way. So this is, when the Buddha says, in various ways cultivate merit and virtue, he's talking about us in our day-to-day lives. When we get off the cushion, when we need to interact with each other, with disappointment, with sadness, with depression, with addiction, with medical problems, with desperation, when we need to interact with friends and enemies, with politics, with everything, the measurable span of our lives. When we need to do that, we have to cultivate all of these good qualities that the Buddha mentioned. And so there is nothing that is outside of the Buddha way. We can't just separate and divide and put it down for a while. It's a continuous action, continuous activity. And so I think the call here for us is, though we sit, and it's at the core of our practice, we sit every day, hopefully. When we get off the cushion, the call is to look left and right, up and down, at the measurable, infinite span of our lives and of the Buddha way, and strive to fulfill it. And this is where I will say thank you for your time, for listening. And I'll stop.